All right, good evening, everybody. So this is going to be the inaugural video for Chicago Joe page. So what this page is about, my name is not Joe. My name is Josh, but Chicago Joe is going to be kind of a play on Average Joes from Dodgeball. So I love my movies and I love my sports, but um, these are going to be my average videos. I'm not an expert. I'm not ESPN. I'm not Barstool. I love both of those. I listen to ESPN 1000 in Chicago all the time, even though I don't live there anymore. I also follow Barstool and everything they do, and they are great. Everybody over there. This is not a competition page by any means for anything like that. So, but not to sound like Troy McClure from The Simpsons, but you might remember me from my. This is the same page as the Mallergen page. To my one follower I had on that last page, I did change the name. I sure hope you stick around. If not, this might not be for everyone, but thanks for following. But I hope you stick around because we're going to talk some Chicago sports now. So if you're a Chicago sports fan, so basically what this page is I needed something. I couldn't keep buying bottles of gin and reviewing them every week. That doesn't stop me though. I've got a glass of scotch here, so we're gonna drink a glass of scotch and we're gonna go over some Chicago sports. I figured I needed something where I didn't have to buy a bottle every week and spend it, and I'm not really drinking as much as I used to anymore. So I figured I needed something that was free and something that I had knowledge of, and I kind of want to just provide I feel like I have a unique perspective on a lot of things, and the way I look at situations, the way I look at teams and their strategies and their players, and I think I have a little bit different of an opinion than a lot of the ESPN or Barstool guys. Once again, I'm not competing with them, but I hope that my opinion can kind of give somebody a different perspective on how things are going for some of these teams and some of these sports. And so that's my goal, is just to provide a different perspective and hopefully entertain some people along the way. I am going to be putting up a lot of these videos. These are unscripted. I don't really have a plan. I don't have notes even. I'm winging this. Couple housekeeping items though is I am going to try and keep this very factual. I would hope that people put in the comments if you're watching this and you find I got a stat wrong or I'm completely off with my assessment of something and I've missed a detail that's kind of necessary and makes me sound wrong. My goal is not never to be wrong on this. I'm factual. Call me out. It's fine. I'll get it right. I'll look it up. So my goal, you're gonna be seeing me look over here quite often, kind of off to the side. I've got some AI up. I'm not using AI to do any of these videos, but I am using it to do some research and pull some stats that maybe aren't readily available, just from like a quick sports reference website or something like that. I'm gonna kind of pull some stats from maybe, let's say, over the last 2 games. What's this guy averaging? So that's not easy to do without AI. So I'm gonna be using that on this computer. And as I said, this is unscripted, so if you see me kind of sitting over here thumbing through something and looking for a specific piece, I'll still be talking to you along the way. But if my attention seems off of the camera here, that's kind of the reason why. So my goal is to make a bunch of these videos, but I also I'm gonna be doing some live videos, and I'll do them at a different time, not 11 o'clock at night. But this is my average page, average sports talk. You can see my Christmas tree box in the back. I have yet to put that away. So it's as average as it gets. This is my basement. I'm doing this, and this is fun for me. So even if nobody's watching, or even a few people watch it, this is what I like to do, and this is what I'm going to be doing. So about this page, born and raised in Chicago, I'm a huge Chicago sports fan. There are some Chicago teams that you're probably not going to find me talking about, just because either I know nothing about them or I just don't have an interest in it. Like, this to me has to be something I'm interested in. So one thing I'll be covering it, like, I'll try to cover major stuff. If something happened today, like big in sports, like Tom Brady decides he's going to come back and play another season, like, I will cover some stuff like that. So I'm not immune to talking about other things that are not Chicago based sports. But I'm going to stick to my big main guns, which is Bears, Bulls. I'm also going to do some Blackhawks and Cubs. I might talk White Sox a little bit, but honestly, I don't know anything about White Sox. I'm a North Sider by heart, so you're not going to get much on me in that. I also don't know soccer too well, so if the Fire or anybody else starts getting big, I'll talk about it, but not going to do that. I'm also a big Northwestern fan. Grew up right about their now torn down and rebuilt football stadium. So I will talk some Northwesterns and maybe even some Big Ten sports. I also will talk some Big 12 and SEC. I'm a big college sports fan in addition to the pro stuff. So also a big Jayhawk fan. So I know I have a bunch of Jayhawks out there in Chicagoland that would probably want to hear kind of my analysis of some of that stuff. So those are going to be some more niche videos that I understand if some of the Chicago people are like, why the heck is he talking about this? But I mean, there's stuff like NIL we can talk about with college sports now. So we can get into some stuff that's not necessarily just, you know, a couple college sports, and we can talk about overall atmosphere. So by far my favorite of all the teams, I grew up a Bears fan. Dave Duerson's son was on my football team in high school. So was Mike McCaskey's son. So I have a strong connection to the Bears through those means. Not that any of them would remember me or know who I was to this day, but that just kind of helped me grow closer to the Bears. And I always said the first video I'm going to do on the Chicago Joe page is going to be the Bears, and that kind of got a wrench thrown into it the other day when the Bulls decided that they were going to fire their front office staff. So I decided today we're going to start with some Bulls, and we're going to talk about like my take on where we're going and what we're doing here. So a little bit of a backstory about me is so as I told you, born and raised in Chicago, but I was growing up. I was starting to figure out what I wanted to be as far as a sports fan goes right when Michael Jordan was starting to win his championships. And so I was there for all 6 of them. I was there for the entire 90s decade in Chicago watching them. Remember my dad punching holes through the ceiling because he jumped so high because Jordan would hit game winners. And so that's kind of where I got my start with the Bulls. And that's kind of makes me a little bit of an angry Bulls fan when we get to this day and age, because that glory, I had it for one season with the Derrick Rose era, but I haven't had that feeling again. I have not abandoned ship. I'm not a fair weather fan. I will roll with the Bulls every year, but it's been a tough ride ever since the last dance. And so anyone watching this page as a Chicago fan knows that the Bulls just fired Artūras Karnišovas. Sometimes names escape me, so apologize if I'm saying it wrong. AK, I'm going to call him Acme, is what I call Artūras, and Marc Eversley, who were Vice President of Basketball Operations and GM. So they were fired, and, you know, when they were first hired, I was actually kind of excited because as much of a John Paxson fan as I was, when he took over for Jerry Krause, he did such a great job. He got the Bulls back to the playoffs. He got Deng, Gordon, Heinrich. He brought those guys, and suddenly they're a playoff team again. I'm like, okay, well, here we go. Hometown guy hitting the heroic shot to win a championship, and here he comes back to save us again after we fell off the charts after Jordan retired. And so I was a big Paxson fan, but it grew pretty sour pretty quickly. I realized that they had built a culture where, one, they couldn't hire a dang good coach. Like, Tom Thibodeau was the only coach they hired that was good, and they ran him out of town. They fired his assistants and then eventually ran him out of town, saying he drove the guys in the ground and played them too hard, but they didn't give him a deep enough bench, so he had to play his guys hard. But outside of that, their coaching hires Tim Floyd, Vinny Del Negro, like Boylan, like we're talking, and then even Fred Hoiberg, like towards the end of them, like. And I thought Hoiberg was a decent choice, but he just wasn't qualified to be their coach, and they didn't give him the right kind of players that a guy like Hoiberg needed to win a title. And so I always kind of criticized them for, you know, they couldn't sign the big guys either. Like they made their pitch to LeBron, Wade, and Bosch when they were trying to do the big 3 and sign somewhere, and I thought the Bulls had a good chance of that, but something tells me that they were not convincing enough. They didn't have the right coach in place. You know, Eric Spoelstra, he's a great coach. I would say that, I mean, that was a big part of that deal there. So, excuse me, I kind of looked at that and I was like, okay, well, this kind of not working out. They can't get these big free agents. By the time we got Rondo and Wade, it was, you know, way past the time we should have had them, and that wasn't going to work. And I liked Jimmy Butler a lot, but I mean, he was homegrown. They didn't really draft him or And then that was all Tom Thibodeau building him up. So, and he had a work ethic like nobody's business. So to me, that just signaled that they just weren't there. They weren't making the big trades, the big deals. At one point, I heard that Kobe Bryant was actually on the trading block, and they almost had a deal to bring him to Chicago. And I'm sitting there thinking, that is classic them. Like, I would have taken that any day of the week. Bring Kobe. He wanted to play in the place where Jordan played. That was his idol. And so I'm sitting here thinking, like, man, like, you had that chance and then you whiffed on it. Like, that to me is just, I love John Paxson. I love the way that they got rid of him, because they basically said, we're going to bump you up there. You're a legend here. You're just not cutting it as GM. And so I was super excited when that change was made. It was long overdue. And so then they brought in Artūras and Marc Eversley, and I thought they had a good track record. You know, their teams where they came from, like, they took guys who were probably not the best draft picks, probably not the best free agents, but they turned them into something that was good, something that was competitive. And so I was like, okay, that's what we need. We need these guys who can evaluate this talent a little bit better. I don't want to sign Ben Wallace after he's, you know, not with his boys anymore in Detroit. Like, that was never going to work. And so I want good decisions, good high IQ basketball decisions. And so I was very excited when we went this route, because I said, these guys, they're going to make deals. They're not going to sit here and think that, like, we don't need to do anything. We're good how we are. They came in and immediately said, there's a few players we got to get rid of. Like, this is not going to work. The problem being is, and I applauded them. Like, when they first came in, you know, they basically looked at Zach LaVine. They said, that's our star, our budding star. It was kind of unknown at that time if he was going to turn into a superstar, and he never really quite did, even though he got the money for it. But that's another point we'll get to later. But here's my deal with it, though, is the team they built, I was happy they were making moves. They made that trade for Vooch, and I was like, man, they might have given up a little too much, but we got a center who's supposedly a three-point shooter. I was like, they're making moves. Like, here we go. We're joining a more modern era of basketball. They're trying to give our coaches something to work with, and LaVine was kind of upset. He was mad that they weren't building around him, and that's exactly what their first priority was. Is they said, we're going to build around him, and so that they did, and they got rid of guys like Wendell Carter, who we all knew was never going to turn into anything. The one they got rid of that I thought was a bad move was Lauri Markkanen. He ended up showing how great he is once he left. And so I applauded them, because we had gone so many years where it was like, okay, we haven't been making these moves. We should have had Kobe Bryant on this team, and we didn't pull the trigger. Like, what are we doing? And so then we started pulling the trigger, and I said, okay, you know, these guys are the change, you know, and sometimes you overcompensate. Sometimes you bring in guys who are the exact opposite of what the last guy was, and that's never a good thing to do. And so, hindsight, I don't think they were the right choice for the job, but here's where it gets kind of murky. So I also applauded when they fired their coaches. They got rid of Jim Boylan, and I think he was the last one before we went. But then I heard they were going for Billy Donovan, and I said, okay, Billy Donovan. He wasn't fired. He mutually agreed to part ways with Oklahoma City because he didn't want to be part of a rebuild. And so I said, okay, that guy's got a pedigree. He's known for adapting not only to the play style of what's going on in the NBA, but adapting to the players that he has on the roster. And I said, that's what we need, because I was so sick of watching Fred Hoiberg coach teams saying he built it as a championship roster, and then he realized that Paul Gasol's not going to run down the court very fast and hustle like you have to in the modern NBA era. And so that's kind of where we were. And, you know, Jimmy Butler, I love Jimmy Butler, but he was that grinded out type guy. And so what do? They go out and they get Vooch. They bring in Billy Donovan. They go out and get Vooch. They go out and get DeMar DeRozan to put around Zach LaVine. And so at the time, I was like, okay, we made moves. We've got three guys you can consider. Like, Vooch was maybe a borderline superstar. He was a serviceable center. DeRozan was always known as kind of like that alpha on the team. And then we had Zach LaVine, who I know he was high flying. The ACL was no longer a problem. He proved that was not going to be an issue. And then he started shooting threes, and so I said, okay, well, this is the type of guy that we need on this team. I know he can't play defense, but he's the type of guy that we need. And so they went and did all this, and I know hindsight's 20/20, but when they did all this, I was very excited. I said, okay, these are moves. It's something different. Whatever we've been doing has not been working, especially after we did that 3 alpha thing with Rondo, Wade, and Butler. Like, that was just a disaster, but at least there was a plan. And so I said, okay, I see the plan here. They're trying to put pieces around Zach LaVine, and then they're going to go draft and sign people to put around him. And so I was on board with it, but the one thing I looked at that was kind of interesting that not a lot of people saw, DeMar DeRozan, when he was with Toronto, that team could have been pretty good. And especially with him on there, it should have been a lot better. And so then I wondered, like, what's going on with Toronto? Why are they not winning with DeMar DeRozan? And then they shipped him off to San Antonio and brought in Kawhi Leonard to go with Toronto. The year after that, they go and win a title. And there is a lot of debate as to whether that title is, I mean, it's a valid title, but I mean, Steph Curry and the Warriors, they were the most beat up team I've ever seen. And I think Curry was one of the only starters, the only star that was on the court for that, like him and Draymond. And so we kind of got to that point. But then I was like, man, like, as soon as they got rid of DeRozan and brought in a guy like Kawhi, who we all know Kawhi has that work ethic, that dog in him. And so I was like, something's off with DeMar. Like, the fact that they got rid of him and that team exploded. And I was like, he's not a bad teammate. He passes the ball. He doesn't take all the shots. He's not a James Harden. And so I was like, what's going on? And then he went to San Antonio. And granted, San Antonio was kind of in a lull. They were not really, they were at the end of the Popovich era. They didn't have superstars anymore. I don't even know if Tony Parker was still on the team. I don't even know if Ginobili was still there, but it was kind of like the after party. But still, DeRozan went there, and suddenly they were no good anymore. And so I thought to myself, like, what is going on? But this was all during the time that Golden State was really dang good. And then I realized Golden State, they were the team that changed the style of the NBA. They were the team that came in and started raining down threes on people. And it was something that kind of started in the Reggie Miller days with the Pacers. Like, that's what the Pacers did to the Bulls a lot, where they would rain down those threes, and you were like, man, this is tough to stop. Like, if you're going to stop Michael Jordan, this is the way you got to do it. And they almost did it. Larry Bird almost pulled that one off. And I remember that series. It was a rough series trying to get past them to go back to the finals. And so we get into this, we get lost in this, like, whole, like, okay, well, we brought in DeMar DeRozan, but I'm sitting there thinking, like, every team that DeMar touches is not doing well. And so then I started looking it up, and I'm like, so what's wrong with DeMar? And then I realized nothing's wrong with DeMar. He learned from Kobe. He had the most unbelievable mid-range jumper. He's a generational talent when it comes to mid-range jumpers. He can get to the basket. He did start working on his deep game, his three-pointers, but he really just wasn't there. And I was like, what's the problem? Like, because they're getting the assists. Levine's dishing the ball out. He can shoot the threes. He can get to the basket. DeRozan's the same way. Vooch, I mean, he's good for a double-double every night. Like, why is this team not winning? And then I looked at it and I realized this league is shifting. The Spurs could shoot threes. Back when they had Parker, Ginobili, they had Danny Green, Kawhi Leonard, you have all those guys on that team who can hit these three-pointers. And then Golden State came in and said, well, we can do that better. And they did it to a level that was never seen before. Like, they had the best regular season in NBA history. And so I'm sitting there thinking, like, what is it? Like, is it just the threes? But no, it was pace. The pace of play. And I thought we got away from that because we got rid of Jimmy Butler for that reason. And yes, Butler had success at Miami in the past few years. I love Jimmy Butler, but he might have had success, but yeah, his style is gone. That whole grind it out, let's go one-on-one. And what did we have on that team? We had Zach LaVine. Zach LaVine's that ISO one-on-one. He's going to grind it out. He can shoot the three, though, a lot better than Butler could. So I was like, okay, we've got that. That's old school. That's not going to work. Then you look at DeMar DeRozan. Mid-range jumper, dude. He will pass up a three and hit the mid-range. That used to be the way to do it. That's the Kobe Bryant way. He learned. He was an idol, or Kobe was his idol. And there's pictures of him actually at a Kobe Bryant camp. And so that's DeMar DeRozan's game. It's not bad. He's not a bad player. It's not that he's not a team player. He's very much a team player. He was a locker room favorite. I like the guy. I have nothing against him, but his style is 100% outdated. And what's Vooch? That's that big center anymore. Like, everyone's gonna give me crap about this because we got Jokic. I mean, everyone looks at Joker and they're like, okay, well, isn't he different? But he can shoot the three, and so could Dirk Nowitzki. Like, as much as they were big, clunky big men, they stretched the floor. And then you had like people like Kristaps Porzingis come in, and the day and age of that big Greg Ostertag, Luke Longley style, Amari Stoudemire type center coming in and just hitting hook shots down low, like, was over. You needed length, you needed speed, and you need to be able to hit that 3-point ball. And so I realized that we literally built a team, and we leveraged our first round picks. We leveraged some of our, like, Lauri Markkanen fits that profile perfectly. He could hit the three. He was lengthy. He was fast. He is a modern day player. And we traded him away so we could bring in Vooch, DeRozan, and LaVine. Well, we had LaVine already. We didn't bring him in, but that's where we got into a problem. Is we built an old school team. If this team were playing in 2005, 2006, and they were being coached by, even Billy Donovan could have taken a team like that to the conference finals, if not farther. That's how this team was built. But we weren't playing in that year. We were playing just a few years ago. And so, we're talking a team that's trying to win off mid-range jumpers, and the math doesn't work. I looked it up. So I looked up the math when it comes to this, and the math says, some teams are even sacrificing percentage on three-pointers. Like, it used to be you want to shoot 38. I think one year Golden State actually shot 42%, or at least Steph Curry did, but they would always average around 37, 38. Some of these teams came in, and I didn't realize this. Here's a stat. Golden State, in their prime with Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, and even Kevin Durant hitting threes, and that team that was playing, the amount of threes that they hit was ridiculous, but that team would be one of the worst in the NBA today at three-pointers. That gives you an idea of how much teams have bought into not only pace of play, but three-pointers. And I didn't realize that, and maybe I'm the last one to figure this out. Maybe. I'm sorry if I am. Like, that's why you call me the Chicago Joe, because I'm an average guy. But maybe I didn't realize this and everyone else did. But that's a ridiculous stat, that one of the best teams to ever step on a court would today, if that same team stepped on the court, would be probably not even, I mean, they might make the playoffs and they might make a run at it, but their 3-point shooting is second to a lot of people in this league today. And so I actually looked it up. Oklahoma City and Indiana would put them to shame. But the crazy part about it is that it's not about percentage anymore. It's about volume. So I looked up some of the stats. They say if you shoot 40 shots a game, if you shoot 20 shots a game or 25 shots a game and you shoot it at 38%, that's not as good as shooting 40 three-pointers a game and shooting only 34%. So these teams are doing some math and saying, and I don't know this math, it's basic arithmetic, but I don't have the numbers in front of me, so I'm not going to try and do math for you guys. But the crazy thing is, though, is that these teams are sacrificing some of this percentage. Like, shoot 34% from three is not the worst thing in the world nowadays, but you got to take the volume and you got to play fast. And so that's kind of what this league has come down to now. And if there's one thing these teams under Billy Donovan did not do, they did not play fast. They were some of the slowest playing teams in the league, and their 3-point volume was awful. And they didn't have a bad percentage. They shot 38% just a few years ago when they had Kobe White, LaVine, and DeRozan playing, and Vooch starting to get better from outside. They were shooting 38%. And that's decent. They were probably right around the curve in the league. But their volume, they were shooting like 29 threes a game when other teams were shooting 40. And you're just hitting that many more threes. That's math, man. There's nothing about that. And these teams are playing fast. Like, so if you're grinding it out and they're just shooting down the court and hitting more threes than you, that's just math. There's nothing you can do about that unless you increase your pace of play a little bit better defense, and learn to shoot the three. And so I didn't realize that. So I'm looking at all of this, and I looked at some stats even after, like, as we know, the Bulls tore it down in February. So they said, we're getting rid of everybody. We're going to tear it down. We're going to bring in some young talent that has high upside but hasn't really proved themselves. So what they do, they went out and got all these guys. I looked at their pace of play was second this year. They were the second fastest team in basketball. That's a great sign. That's Billy Donovan being a modern coach, adjusting his team, realizing that that's been a problem for years, and now he has the players to run the court. And those are the players they went out and got. But when you look at what Artūras and Marc Eversley built, they built this team to some old, non-modern standard. They were stuck in their ways. But the worst part about it is they dug into it. When we questioned them and said, hey, this team's not good enough, they said, well, all the other teams in the league have been playing for at least 4 or 5 years together, so we need to get to that point. And they just kept digging in with this, let's bring everybody back. Let's maybe add a few pieces that can shoot better threes. And that was the biggest part to me, is when they started bringing in guys who could shoot threes, I was like, that's good. But it's about volume. It's not about how well you hit. I don't care if a guy hits 42% if he's only shooting 4 threes a game. He needs to be shooting 7, 8 threes a game and hitting maybe a little bit less percentage, but you're hitting more and you're scoring more. And so, you know, they dug into this whole, like, let's keep running the same thing out there, keep running your head into the wall, and eventually the wall's going to break, right? And so, to me, that's kind of an indictment on the front office. And I say that I was very excited when Billy Donovan came in. I soured on him a bit, but now I'm realizing as I go back and look at the stats, it's not Donovan's fault. They didn't give him a hammer to put the nails in. They gave him like a pencil to try and hammer some of these nails in. Like, it just was never going to work with the personnel on that court. And the telling thing to me is that Michael Reinsdorf came out the other day, and so first of all, he said whoever's hired for the front office is going to have to work with Billy Donovan if Billy Donovan wants to be a part of this team. So he basically said, like, Billy is our coach, and whoever comes in has to be cool with that. So one, that gives me, like, how much power is that new vice president going to have? Like where are we going with this? Like, are we going to hire somebody who's of any prestige who comes in and says, I can't even hire my own coach? Like, that makes me a little nervous. It makes me a little nervous because, I mean, I feel like the general manager and the vice president of basketball operations should get to hire their coach. But this is kind of like the Eberflus situation with the Bears. And we'll talk Bears plenty, but, you know, I don't ever believe that Ryan Poles made that decision when he came in to keep Eversley. Like, that was not his decision. That decision was long made before he was hired. And so, and we saw how that worked out. And I'm worried that we're in that same situation. But I think Billy Donovan has actually adapted his game in the way he needs to. And they're shooting 39 threes a game now, right around the league average. And they're shooting right around the league average, maybe a little bit above for what they're making. And you look at this year when they started out 5-0. Why? Because they were leading the league in pace. Josh Giddey going down the court with these guys, like, this was the fastest team in the league. They were 106, I think, was their pace. I don't know what that pace means, but 106, that was more than anybody in the league. Problem was they couldn't play defense, and they didn't have the talent and the high IQ in basketball to keep it up. So once teams realize that these guys are playing fast, but as long as we keep playing fast with them, eventually they're going to crack. And that's why we went 5-0 and then suddenly just crumbled underneath us. And so that's kind of like where we got to this. But I am very encouraged that Billy Donovan looked at the stats and he adapted his game. He said, we are going to be a fast team, and they're going to end the year as the second fastest team in the league. And that's a good start. And their three-point percentage is not bad. Ever since the guys they reloaded with, like, we've got Rob Dillingham on this team who's shooting really well. He's doing great. We got, like, who else we got here? I'm just kind of going through the roster, but I mean, we've got a good core with Giddey, Bucelis, and Noah Asengu. I don't know how to say his name, Asengu. And so I think he's kind of a future because he's a 6'8", 6'8" from France. He's one of those long defensive types, but his offense is a little sketchy. But the only thing I have concerns for, because, if we keep Billy Donovan, we're going to run a similar crew out here, although we do have 3 picks in the next draft. Well, Portland's not going to make a lottery, so we're going to have, we're likely going to have their pick if they make the playoffs. It's not looking likely that they make the playoffs, but we're gonna have a decent pick. We have a 20% chance right now of getting a lottery pick, which that would drastically accelerate everything. But so we're looking at least one high first round pick, possibly top 10, and then we got these second round picks, which we can get into that all day. But I don't know why we trade everyone away to get a million second round picks. I don't know what we're gonna do with that. Whoever comes in the next front office is gonna have to look at all these second round picks and say, well, it's either trade bait, or I think they have a 25% chance when you pick second round picks of getting someone who's at least a role player. That's not very good. So I mean, maybe with all their picks they can get lucky on one person to be a role player with all those, but that's a waste. We traded away people like Kobe White and Ayo Dosunmu. Like, we got rid of some of these guys for all these second round picks, and if we don't make those into something, I'm gonna be very upset about that. But what bothers me about this team is so Josh Giddey he's the real deal. So I'm looking at Josh Giddey. I'm like, okay, he's the real deal. I like what I'm seeing. Leonard Miller hasn't been half bad. He's got 7.6 points per game this year so far. Bucelis, he's going to be a star. I like him. Problem with him is he can't shoot the three. And so we're still talking this pace of play and three-pointers. Those are the keys. Oklahoma City just won a championship with that. Golden State won multiple championships with that. You know, that's the new standard. Indiana was one of the better three-point shooting teams, and they were in the finals with Oklahoma City. So we're looking at a world where it's three-pointers and pace of play, and we have pace of play. So we're going to need some shooters. We need a big man who can protect the rim, because in a day and age where you've got all these three-point shooters, you're getting everybody out there and automatic switching on people, but that creates lanes just out of nowhere, where people can slash, which almost lends itself to a DeMar DeRozan type who can slash in there. But you got all these abilities of people to slash, and so now we're talking a world where you need a rim protector, which is kind of odd because the trend for a long time was I need a long center who can run the court, dribble the ball. Like Kevin Durant wasn't a center, but we need a guy like that. And now we're going back to like Wembanyama. Like, he can shoot the three. He's long, he's fast, he's athletic, but he's also a rim protector. And that's kind of a weird combination of a guy. Like, it used to be like back in the day, like a Ben Wallace, you have a rim protector, or you have a Shaq who was a rim protector, but he could score offense, but it was always within like a few feet of the basket. And now you got guys who can shoot threes, dribble the ball down the court, outrun anyone. You can guard 1 through 5, but you're also a rim protector. That's almost like a quarterback in the NFL. Like, everyone says, like, yeah, you can't win a Super Bowl without having a franchise quarterback, or you better have the most ridiculous defense ever with a serviceable like game manager, a quarterback. Trent Dilfer looking at you. But here's the thing: is like, it's like Bucelis, he's getting better at three, but he's still young. And it's like, I need guys coming out of college who have been shooting threes. Guys who have been playing college ball against everybody else, and they're draining threes. And you saw it in the NCAA tournament this year. All those Big Ten teams, suddenly they're shooting. Big Ten used to be a grinded out type place. Like, you look at the old Michigan State teams, like, they could shoot threes. Well, a lot of those guys were grinded out type guys. It was always a thing. Like, Michigan used to grind it out back in the day. I mean, Indiana teams used to do that. And even more recently, you have teams like Wisconsin, like the Bo Ryan. I'm going to take up all of the shot clock. And then, like, there was no pace of play, and three shooting wasn't as crazy. And now you look at like teams like Ben McCollum's Iowa, like, they were just raining threes. Michigan won a national title. I don't know what their three percentage was, and I'm not going to look that one up right now because it's not relevant to what we're talking about. But I love Bucelis, but these guys need to start learning to shoot threes because our pace of play is there. And if we can learn to shoot threes, but the other thing that we need a rim protector, because, I mean, Noah's only 6'8". We do have a 6'9" guy. I've never heard of that guy, but let's see, who else do we have that's tall here? I mean, we still got Patrick Williams on the team. I mean, I'd love to dump that contract. Like, we're paying him $100 million to score 6.9 points a game. So, but like, bottom line is, like, Jalen Smith, he's 6'8". I need a 7-footer on this team. I need a guy who's going to be down there, and If you drive past our guys because you're shooting threes all game, when we come out at you and you slash the lane, I need that rim protector to really make you like either take a mid range or rethink your ability to go inside. And so I mean, we got Zach Collins. He's 6'9", but and he's got 9.7 points a game. That's not bad, but I mean, we also got Rob Dillingham, and I gotta give a shout out to him because he has been a very much a bright spot. He's one of those guys that I think could be part of a core going forward. I want to at least have him as a sixth man, but we'll see where we go with kind of when we get a new GM and vice president in here. But bottom line is, I'm looking at this team, and I'm actually going to be the voice who says I think we should keep Billy Donovan. If I agree with that decision, if he wants a coach, he doesn't want to do a rebuild, and I don't think this team is a rebuild though, because we have Giddey, we have Bucelis, we have Noah, we have Rob Dillingham who's showing promise, and we have what's likely to be a top 10, if not a top 4 pick this year. I don't know if we're going to get lucky again. Maybe the Derrick Rose years come back and we get that top pick and we go out and get Boozer. How great would that be to get another Boozer on this team? And he could be kind of a rim protector for us, but also a scorer. I mean, that's the kind of guy we're looking for. I don't think this team's needing a Darren Peterson. As I told you, I'm a KU fan. I like Darren Peterson. I'm glad KU got him, but man, that guy he had a cramping problem, and he was good, but he was never like the lights out, like unanimous #1 pick. I would have loved to see that guy if NBA allowed or forced guys to stay there until they were like the football rules. You have to be there 3 years and then you can bypass your senior season. Imagine Darren Peterson 2 years from now just continuing to refine that game, and I'd like to see how he can shoot at the next level. Some of these guys, I'm not convinced they're shooters, like DeBonsa from BYU. Some of these guys, I'm not convinced they're shooters, and when you go to that NBA and that line moves back, you better be willing to hit that. So basically where I'm at is I've seen some of the names. I don't think we're getting Mike Dunleavy. He was handpicked by Golden State. His dad was involved there. I mean, yes, he played for the Bulls for a few years. That doesn't give us any entitlement to bring him in and think that he's going to come here. I heard Kyle Korver the other day, which, I mean, so some people subscribe to the fact that a general manager, like whatever style or however they played when they were there, they might be good at recruiting those type of guys. I think Ryan Poles has actually kind of done that on the Bears. He played offensive line, and their offensive line has been vastly improved. But I'm going to look at this from I don't know what Kyle Korver was never a superstar. He was a great 3-point shooter, and that's basically all he was. And so, I know he's an assistant GM right now. I don't know what that guy's going to give us that's going to take us to that next level. But I also don't quite know what Michael Reinsdorf is going to do here. Like, he says he's going to get more involved. He said John Paxson and an outside firm are going to help find their next executives, but I'm just kind of curious, I agree with the decision to keep Billy Donovan, but I'm curious what kind of executive you think you're going to bring in that doesn't even get to pick their own coach. Like, if I'm a smart guy, I know that I only get one shot at being a GM or a vice president of basketball operations. I get one shot at it. Most guys don't get a second shot. So to come in here and think what if Billy Donovan just doesn't have it anymore? What if he doesn't want to put in the effort? He's tired, he's getting older. What if he just doesn't want to do it anymore? What if he doesn't believe in this? And the other part to it too is they said Donovan's going to get more say in who they bring in, which I think is the right way to do it. Once again, I agree with it, but who's going to come in and want to be over all this and put your job on the line saying, I have to ride with this coach and I have to give him a say in all these decisions that should be mine as well? And so maybe this is an attempt to get somebody who works with him. I would be okay with that. Let's see if we can get somebody in here who's going to work with Donovan instead of I'm the GM, I make the decisions and you coach him. I don't like that standard. I've always been a fan of we have it right now with Ben Johnson and Ryan Poles where they're working together. They're saying, hey, what players do you need? I'll go get them. and tell me what you need, tell me who you like. They're working together and it's working. They're getting wins. They're going deep in the playoffs. They beat the Packers twice. It's working. And that is the biggest underrated relationship in all of sports, is that GM and coach. Because I mean, I look at it when you see Gar Forman and what he did to Tom Thibodeau back in the day with the Bulls. They fired, was it Ron Adams, was a longtime assistant of Thibodeau, and they fired him. Like, that to me was like the end of, like I said, I'm sorry, Paxton's a legend, always going to be one of my favorites, but they got to go. Because as soon as you start making decisions about staff members on the coaching staff, that's not your decision. That's the coach's decision. You can talk to him and say, hey, I need this guy gone. But as soon as you start firing guys on his staff, that's when it's over for me. So my hope is that they bring in an executive, somebody who knows what they're doing, someone who knows the modern game, but somebody who's going to work with Billy Donovan and say, like, I understand that Billy has adapted his game, and he's done it beautifully. I know some people are going to beat me up for defending Billy Donovan so much, and I was in the same boat as of a few weeks ago. And then I started looking up stats. He is adapting his game, and he's doing it very, very well. And so I'm like, this is the guy that we need as coach. And I do hope he decides to come back. I hope they can convince him, like, this is not a rebuild. You know, we got pieces in place. We got a high draft pick. You've got a young team that you've already done some stuff with, that you've proved you can work with. And so that's my hope, is that they're bringing the guy in and saying, basically forcing him to say, like, you are not going to overrule everything. You're not going to get to pick your own coach. You're here to work with Billy Donovan. Get him what he needs. Work with him. And I think they're also setting up, like, maybe one day Billy Donovan becomes like GM of the team, and maybe he has that affinity for, like, if we're going to rebuild, I want to be that guy that rebuilds it, and I'll let somebody else coach it. But jury's still out. We don't know what the Reinsdorf family's going to do. We know their history with the White Sox. Outside of the Jordan years, the Bulls, outside of Jordan years and 1 year with Derrick Rose where they were really good, like, I don't have a lot of faith in this ownership to do this, but it's a good sign that they're taking a more interest and more of a hands-on approach with this stuff. But still, to me, I look at this and I'm like, man, I just, what executive that is really good is going to come and put their job on the line and basically give up all their control over what they should have control over? And so I look at this, and we're going to have to see how it plays out. But I think step one is seeing if Billy Donovan decides to stay on. He was interested in the North Carolina job. He didn't get it. North Carolina was clearly targeting an NBA coach. And so the fact that they hired Malone, a former NBA coach, that tells you that Donovan was probably very much interested and very much in the running for that position. So that's basically all I have for you tonight. This was first episode. I'll probably be making improvements, making this better. This is my first try at it, but anyone tuning in, please hit subscribe, give a thumbs up. You know, I'm gonna be here a lot more for you. Next time, I hope to do the Bears, but like I said, this is based on current events. So, you know, if 5 of the Cubs players get injured next week, we're gonna talk Cubs. We're also gonna talk some Blackhawks. We're gonna talk. As I said, I want to get the Bears in there. I also want to talk some Northwestern. They got a new stadium going up. They've got a new practice facility. Recruits just start coming in, and they got Chip Kelly as an offensive coordinator with Jim Neuheisel coaching quarterback. So I think that offense over there is going to be pretty good. I also want to talk NIL. We're in the midst of the mass exodus that all these big programs. It's amazing that you can win a national championship and some of your best players are going to leave because they're getting offered money. Tyron Stokes is getting offered $6 million from Kentucky, I've heard. That's ridiculous for an 18-year-old. And I have opinions about how NIL should be handled, and so I think we need to talk about that. We need to have a serious conversation, and I think it does tie into the NBA too, because, I mean, you look at NFL, they don't really have the NIL problem. Caleb Williams made $10 million before he got there, but it wasn't an issue because these guys still have to stay 3 years. And so I like the idea of college making guys stay for 3 years and then they can bypass their senior season to go. I wish that were the thing, and I wish they put some limits on the money and the amount of time someone can transfer. Like, there's some guys who are on their 5th year of eligibility this year, and they're on their 5th school. And some of these guys who are transferring are not good enough to pull in $1 million from NIL. Like there's just a lot of stuff I would like to get off my chest for the NIL stuff. So we'll talk that as well later. But hit subscribe, hit like, keep following me, and I will be doing some kind of like afternoon, like 2:33, 4 o'clock live streams. And when I start doing those, if I start getting some followers and some people liking stuff and commenting, I'll do some live stuff and we'll interact. Like I'll be watching the chat, and we'll be doing that in real time, and you can talk with me. I'll respond back, and so we'll start doing some of that too. So thank you for tuning in. This is the Chicago Joe page, and we'll see you next time.